My fiancé showed up at the tailor on a Tuesday morning expecting a final fitting. Instead, he found a stranger already wearing his jacket, and that stranger needed it a lot more than he did. Let me back up. I'm an accountant. Have been for 11 years. I know what numbers mean. I know what they don't mean. And I know what it looks like when someone is trying to move money around in a way that benefits only them. I do this for a living. I catch it in spreadsheets, in quarterly reports, in the small rounding errors that are never actually rounding errors. I'm good at my job. Which is why I will never fully forgive myself for not seeing it sooner when it was sitting right across the dinner table from me. His name was Garrett. We met at a work event, not my firm or clients. He was in sales, charming in that particular way, that salespeople can be charming, which means he made you feel like you were the only person in the room even when the room was full. I was 36. I had spent my 30s building something, a townhouse in Charlotte that I bought on my own at 31, a retirement account I maxed out every year without fail, a reliable used car that I paid off in 18 months, and a small but growing investment portfolio that my co-worker Bet liked to call my quiet money. I was not wealthy by the standards of people on television, but I had built what I had from nothing, and I knew exactly what every dollar had cost me. Garrett knew it too. I realize that now. We dated for almost 2 years before he proposed. During those 2 years, he stayed at my place more nights than not, contributed to groceries when I reminded him, and talked about the future in the warm, vague way that feels meaningful when you're falling for someone. He had an apartment across town, a rental, nothing fancy, and a job that he described as transitional, which I understood to mean he was between stable positions and looking. I didn't judge that. I had been between things before. People go through phases. He proposed on a Saturday in March at a restaurant he picked and I paid for because his card wasn't going through. I said yes. I was happy. I called my sister Bet, not my co-worker Bet, my actual sister, from the parking lot before we even drove home, and she screamed so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. The first conversation that should have stopped me cold happened about 3 weeks later. We were sitting at my kitchen table, the one I bought with my first real bonus check, the one I refinished myself over a long weekend with sandpaper and 2 coats of stain. And we were talking about combining finances after the wedding. Reasonable conversation. Normal conversation. I had a whole spreadsheet ready because of course I did. I was thinking joint account for household expenses, separate accounts for personal spending, that sort of thing. Garrett looked at the spreadsheet for about 45 seconds and then said, "What about the house?" I said, "What about it?" He said, "When we get married, it becomes marital property anyway. We might as well go ahead and get my name on the deed now. Makes things simpler." I remember the specific feeling I had in that moment, not alarm exactly. More like the feeling of stepping onto a floor you expect to be solid and finding it gives just slightly under your weight, a small wrongness. I said I'd think about it. He nodded and moved on, and I told myself it was a practical suggestion, not a troubling one. 2 weeks after that, he brought it up again. We were in the car this time, driving back from his parents' place in Concord. His mother had asked over dinner when we were going to settle things, and I hadn't entirely understood what she meant until Garrett explained on the drive home that she meant the deed. His mother had opinions about the deed. "She just thinks it makes sense," he said. "You're going to be my wife. It should reflect that." I said I understood her thinking, but I wasn't comfortable changing the deed before we were actually married. He said he got that. He didn't bring it up again that night. But he did bring it up again that night. But he did bring it up again. Over the next 4 months, the conversation shifted, slowly, the way water erodes something. You don't see it happening, you just eventually notice the shape has changed. First it was the deed, then it was my car. He was still driving his, a 2017 sedan with 90,000 miles on it, and he suggested we sell both and get something together, in both names. I asked what we'd do in the meantime, while we were still technically 2 people with 2 lives, and he said I was being rigid. "You treat your stuff like it's a fortress," he told me once. "I'm going to be your husband. This shouldn't feel like a negotiation." That sentence sat in me for days. I turned it over. I talked to my sister on the phone for 2 hours, and she said, very carefully, "I don't love how he phrased that. I talked to my friend Ren, who is a paralegal and has seen a lot of things, and she said less carefully, "That is a financial red flag and you know it." I knew it. I just wasn't ready to know it out loud yet. The fitting was Garrett's idea. He wanted a custom suit for the wedding, not a rental, a real suit, something he could keep. I found a tailor downtown named Mr. Osei who had been recommended by a woman at my firm, and I paid the deposit, $600. The suit was going to be beautiful, charcoal wool, peak lapels, the kind of thing that photographs well and lasts 20 years if you take care of it. We had 3 fittings scheduled. Garrett made the first one. He skipped the second one because of a work thing that I later found out wasn't actually a work thing. He promised he'd make the third one. The week before the third fitting, everything came apart. We were at my place on a Wednesday night, eating takeout, and he brought up the financial advisor. I had mentioned a few weeks earlier that I wanted to talk to someone before the wedding, just to make sure we were structuring things correctly, protecting both of us. He had agreed at the time. Now, he said he'd been thinking about it, and he didn't really see the point. "What's there to advise?" he said. "We're getting married. Things merge. That's how it works." I said that wasn't entirely how it worked, legally speaking, especially with assets acquired before the marriage. He put down his fork. "You've been talking to someone," he said. I told him I'd done some research. He was quiet for a moment and then he said, "I need you to put the house in both our names before the wedding. The car too. And I want to be added to your investment account." I set down my own fork. "All of it," he said. "Before we do this, if we're actually partners, it needs to look like it." I heard what was underneath that. I had been hearing it for months, actually, building under the surface of every conversation about the deed, the car, the finances. I had been choosing not to name it, sitting at my own kitchen table, at my own table that I had refinished with my own hands. I finally named it. I said, "That sounds like an ultimatum." He said, "It sounds like a reasonable expectation from someone who is about to commit his life to you." I said I needed some time to think. He said fine. He went to bed. I sat at the table for a long time. I didn't sleep much. In the morning I drove to work, sat at my desk, opened a blank document, and started writing down a timeline. Every conversation, every request, every time he had reframed a refusal as selfishness, every time he had made my caution sound like a character flaw. It took me 40 minutes to write it all out. When I was done, I read it back to myself, and the thing I had been almost knowing for months became completely, undeniably clear. I called Ren during my lunch break. She listened to all of it without interrupting, which is one of the things I love most about her. When I finished, she said, "You already know what you're going to do." She was right. I spent that afternoon calling a real estate attorney, not for advice on adding Garrett to the deed, but for advice on protecting it. The attorney, a woman named Ms. Park, was calm and thorough, and did not make me feel foolish for taking 2 years to get here. She walked me through what my exposure actually looked like, what I needed to document, and what steps I should take immediately. By 3 o'clock I had a list. I went home first. I packed a bag with the things he'd left at my place. Clothes, a phone charger, a toiletry bag, the good coffee mug he'd claimed as his. I put the bag by the front door. Then I called a locksmith, who came within the hour and changed the deadbolt and the garage code. Then I called Garrett and told him we needed to talk. He came over that evening expecting, I think, that I had decided to comply. He saw the bag by the door and his expression shifted, confusion first, then something harder. I told him I wasn't going to add him to the deed, or the car title, or my investment account. I told him I wasn't going to do it before the wedding, and I wasn't going to do it after, because there wasn't going to be a wedding. I told him I needed him to take his things and leave. He talked for a long time. He said I was making a decision based on fear, that Ren had gotten in my head, that I was sabotaging something real because I couldn't trust anyone. He said he had never actually wanted to take anything from me, that he just wanted to feel like a partner, that I had always held him at arm's length. He said a lot of things. I listened. When he was done, I said I was sorry it had come to this, but the bag was by the door and I had to be up early. He left. He took the bag. I stood in my entry hall for a while after the door closed. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been in a long time. I wouldn't say it felt good exactly. It felt like the moment after you set down something heavy, your arms still ache, but the relief is real. The next morning I remembered the fitting. The third fitting was scheduled for 10 o'clock. I had paid the deposit. The suit was done. Mr. O.C. had called the previous week to say it was ready, just needed final adjustments. I called him that morning and explained that the wedding had been called off, and I asked what the cancellation policy was. He was kind about it. The deposit was non-refundable, but the suit itself, finished, pressed, hanging on a rack, was mine to do with as I chose. I thought about it for about 30 seconds. There's a transitional employment program in my neighborhood called Second Step. They help people coming out of incarceration find stable work, get interview ready, build back into a normal life. I had donated to them before financially, but I had never given them anything tangible. I called that morning and asked if they could use a charcoal wool suit, custom tailored, in a size 40 regular. The woman I spoke to, her name was Miss Prime Tatum, laughed a little and said, "Are you serious?" I said I was very serious. She said they had a man coming in that afternoon for a job interview, first one in 6 years, and he had nothing appropriate to wear. They'd been scrambling. I drove the suit over myself. I didn't go in for the fitting. I just dropped it with Miss Tatum at the front desk and gave her my number in case there were any alterations needed, though Mr. Osei had done such careful work that I doubted it would be a problem. I found out later from Miss Zane Tatum, who called me the following week, that the man had gotten the job. She said he'd walked in wearing that suit and the interviewer had hired him on the spot. She told me his name was Gerald, that he had 2 daughters he was trying to get back to, and that he had cried when he saw himself in the mirror before he left their office. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the grocery store and cried a little too. Not about Garrett. About Gerald. Here is what I keep thinking about, now that some months have passed and things have settled back into a quiet kind of ordinary. I almost did it. I was that close. I had started at some point to believe that the problem was me, that my caution was selfishness, that protecting what I had built was the same as refusing to love someone fully. Garrett was good at making me feel that way. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't explosive. It was slow and consistent, like pressure applied to something over time. The night I changed the locks, I walked through every room of my house. I stood in the kitchen by the table I refinished. I stood in the doorway of the spare room I use as a home office. I stood in the backyard for a few minutes in the dark, just standing. I thought, I earned this. Not because I'm special, not because I'm better than anyone. Because I worked, and I saved, and I made 100 small decisions over 11 years that compounded into something real. And I nearly let someone talk me into believing that protecting it was a character flaw. I have a financial advisor now, an actual one, not a theoretical future one. Her name is Miss Devereaux, and she is 70% business and 30% grandmother energy, and I trust her completely. We meet every quarter. My retirement account is healthy. My investment portfolio is boring and growing, which is how Miss Devereaux says it should be. I haven't dated anyone since Garrett. I'm not opposed to it, but I've learned something about the difference between someone who wants to build a life with you and someone who wants to move into the life you already built. They look the same at first. They use the same language, partnership, trust, our future. The difference is in what they ask for and when. Someone who wants to build something with you will want to know what you're working toward. Someone who wants what you already have will keep steering the conversation back to what's already yours. My sister called me last month and asked if I was okay. I told her I was more than okay, I was actually good, and that those are different things. She said she knew. She said she was proud of me. I'm a little proud of myself too, if I'm honest. Not for catching it. I caught it later than I should have. But for not letting the guilt of catching it late talk me into staying. The suit looks good on Gerald. I know because Miss Tatum sent me a photo, just his shoulders and the lapel, taken from a respectful angle on the day he started the job. Charcoal wool. Peak lapels. I hope he takes care of it. I hope it lasts him 20 years. I've been thinking a lot about what it actually costs to talk yourself out of what you already know. Not money. Though in my case there was money involved, and I'm clear-eyed about that now. I mean the other cost, the internal one, the slow tax you pay every time you take something true and set it aside because sitting with it feels harder than explaining it away. I knew something was wrong before I admitted I knew. I'm an accountant. I work with numbers because numbers don't lie to you if you read them right. They just tell you what's there. And what was there? In every conversation Garrett kept steering back to the deed in the car and the accounts was a pattern. I could see it the same way I'd see it in a client's books. I just kept choosing to look at something else. That's not a failure of intelligence. I want to say that clearly, because I spent a few weeks after everything fell apart feeling like it was. Like I should have known sooner, caught it faster, acted before I did. But the truth is that caring about someone creates a specific kind of willful blindness, and recognizing that isn't the same as excusing it. It's just honest. What finally moved me wasn't a dramatic moment. It was sitting at my own kitchen table, the one I bought with my first real bonus, the one I refinished myself on a long weekend, writing out a timeline of every conversation, 40 minutes of typing, and when I read it back, there was nothing left to explain away. The pattern was just sitting there, plain as any spreadsheet I'd ever audited. That's the thing about writing things down. It makes you accountable to yourself in a way that thinking rarely does. I changed the locks, I made the call, and then I did something I didn't expect to do. I took the suit, the beautiful charcoal wool suit that had been fitted and pressed, and was ready to be worn at a wedding that wasn't going to happen. And I gave it to a man who had nothing appropriate to wear to the job interview that might change his life. Gerald, 2 daughters. First interview in 6 years. He got the job. I don't think the universe arranged that. I don't think there's a ledger somewhere balancing out my good decision against his good outcome. What I think is simpler. That when you stop spending your energy protecting a bad situation, you have energy left for something else. And sometimes that something else lands in exactly the right place. Ren told me once that the most underrated form of intelligence is knowing when to stop arguing with yourself. She said most people's lives don't fall apart because they made one big wrong choice. They fall apart because they made 100 small choices to ignore what they already knew. I think she's right. And I think the corollary is true too. Most lives get better not from one dramatic turning point, but from a single moment of deciding to stop looking away. I still have the townhouse. I still have the table I refinished. I have a financial advisor I trust and a retirement account that is quietly, boringly healthy, and a locksmith's number saved in my phone. And somewhere across town, Gerald is wearing a charcoal wool suit to work. That's enough. That's more than enough.